as recently a powerful earthquake and volcanic eruption struck Ethiopia, causing widespread destruction and chaos. Now, the magnitude quake hit the eastern part of the country, followed by a volcanic eruption that has sent harsh clouds into the air, affecting thousands of people. But this disaster is not just a local issue. Experts say it is a stark reminder of the devastating effects of climate change, which is becoming increasingly evident around the world. Rising temperatures and changing weather patterns are leading to more frequent and intense natural disasters, from hurricanes to wildfires and now volcanic eruptions, and as well as earthquakes. And it's not just Ethiopia. In recent weeks, we've seen a series of mild earthquakes in the southern region, a trend that's raising concerns about the region's seismic activities. Now, we take a closer look at the impact of this disaster in Ethiopia and what it means for the world. So joining us to discuss this is Professor of Climate Change, Food Systems and Health, London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, Tafadzwa Mabhaudhi. Hopefully I got that correctly. I know I butchered something there, so let me start by apologizing. I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's Tafadzwa Mabhaudhi.
Thank you so much for coming out, Mabhaudhi. Let's just get started, shall we? How is climate change specifically impacting African countries compared to other regions in the world?
So climate change impacts Africa in various ways. And firstly, what we must note is Africa as a whole, and sub-Saharan Africa in particular, is a climate change hotspot. And what we are experiencing in Africa is an increasing frequency and intensity of weather extremes, predominantly floods, droughts, and heat waves. And these have far-reaching implications and impacts in Africa, which we then see either in agriculture, in transport, health, and other climate-sensitive sectors of our economies. And the impacts of climate change in Africa are particularly worsened by the existing high levels of inequalities, poverty, and high unemployment, which means that a large majority of Africans are therefore highly vulnerable. And also considering that a large population in Africa still resides in rural areas and earn their livelihoods from agriculture, which is mostly rain-fed, it also means that they are particularly vulnerable to rainfall variations and extremes such as floods and droughts, and pushing millions of people into hunger.
Mabhaudhi, I'm glad we're having this conversation about, food security, because then we need to talk about the implications for food security and availability and water availability for Africa. I mean, with the public health crisis that we're facing, we've seen monkeypox, we've seen cholera in clusters in Nigeria and Lagos State. It begs to ask a question about the implications for food security with the droughts and with the floods in recent years.
So the implications on food security are quite huge and significant, as we've witnessed in recent years, for example, in the Horn of Africa, in Ethiopia, in Kenya, East Africa, as well as more recently in Southern Africa during 2023-24 season, when an El Nino-induced drought drove millions into hunger, and several countries had to declare a state of emergency because of that situation. We've also seen floods decimating crops, throughout in North Africa, East and Southern Africa, again with the same effect. And besides these extremes of drought and floods affecting crops, we also have increasing rainfall variability, which is resulting in declining yields. We are having extreme temperature heat waves, which are also resulting in declining yields, which then affects food availability, as you mentioned, and also affects food price. And many countries have been seeing food price inflation. And again, the poor cannot then afford food, and you've got a lot of food insecurity then happening. Right. So it's basically amplifying a lot of things.
Right. And with the amplification of this comes health risks as well. What health risks does climate change pose in Africa? And what are some of the most effective adaptation strategies that African nations can implement to mitigate the impacts of climate change? Very quickly, because we're pressed for time.
So there are various health risks. There are risks to infectious diseases such as cholera, waterborne diseases, when you've got flooding and droughts. You've got risks to things such as malaria as well, which is spreading. The rates of incubation, the geographical reach of mosquitoes is spreading. We've got risks also to climate, heat health, with things such as heat strokes due to extreme weather and heat waves that we're experiencing. And you've got mental health risks as well because of repeated exposure to disasters by particular vulnerable groups. Right. So the health are across the entire health spectrum, the risks. And what Africa needs to do really is to strengthen and build a resilient health system that is also inclusive and with equitable access.
All right. Well, I must say thank you so much for taking out the time today just to give us a bit of insight. We appreciate you for doing this with us, Mabhaudhi. He is the Professor of Climate Change, Food Systems and Health, London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine.